Good morning and welcome to the Office of the Prime Minister on this beautiful Thursday morning, January 13, 2022. Please stand for the playing of the National Anthem of Jamaica. For those who are joining us in our media center, you may be seated. For those online, good morning and welcome. Today, January 13, 2022, signals the start of reshaping Jamaica's future through education. Good morning. My name is Naomi Francis, the Press Secretary here at the Office of the Prime Minister, and we're here today to launch the report, the Prime Minister's High-Level Commission on Education Transformation. With us this morning, we're pleased to have Prime Minister the Most Honourable Andrew Holness, Dr. the Honourable Horace Chang, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of National Security, the Honourable Favour Williams, Minister of Education, Youth, I almost said information. We'll get to that very shortly. Senator the Honourable Orvin Hill, the new Minister of Industry, Investment and Commerce. Congratulations, Minister. And the Honourable Robert Nesta Morgan, the Minister without portfolio here at the Office of the Prime Minister, in charge of information. Good morning, Minister, and congratulations. The Honourable members of the Cabinet and Ministers of State, as well as senior public officials who are joining us via our Zoom platform, Excellencies, resident heads of diplomatic missions and heads of the international organizations also joining us virtually, Dr. Angela Brown Burke, the opposition spokesperson on education, Mrs. Maureen Dwyer, beg your pardon, PS, acting in the Ministry of Education and Youth. Good morning and welcome. Professor the Honorable Orlando Patterson, Chairman of the Education Transformation Commission, and other members of the Commission, who I'll get to very shortly, and the staff of the Commission Secretariat. Other attendees, especially those who are stakeholders in the field of education, and of course, members of the media who will be able to ask some questions very shortly after the presentations. Good morning to you. This report that we're launching today, I believe, is 165 pages, one for every day of the year. That has taken much work and lots of dedication by members of the Commission. In fact, there is an abridged version that's about 75 pages, and of course there is a summary of the recommendations, and we will certainly ensure that it is widely available for those who would want to read it. Let me remind you of members of the Education Transformation Commission. The chairman, of course, is Professor the Honourable Orlando Patterson, OM, John Krause, Professor of Sociology at Harvard University. On the committee as well, we have Dr. Dana Morris Dixon, Chair of the Governance and Accountability and Tertiary Committees. We have Mr. Jeffrey Hall, who is also joining us online. He's co-chair of the Finance Committee of the Commission. Professor David Tennant, Ms. Floretta Plummer, Ms. Erica Simmons, Professor Michael Taylor, Ms. Esther Tyson, Dr. Garth Anderson, Professor Eleanor Brown, Professor Colin Giles, the Most Reverend Donald Rees, Archbishop Emeritus of Kingston and Chairman of the Ecumenical Education Committee, Professor Maureen Sams Vaughan, Mr. Gordon Swaby, and also serving on the committee, Ms. Trudy Deans, Senior Advisor at the Office of the Prime Minister. May I thank everyone for their service, and ahead of our launching officially the document and the report, may I invite our esteemed Permanent Secretary here at the Office of the Prime Minister, and as well, working very hard at the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, Mrs. Audrey Sewell, to lead us in prayer.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Sorry. Thank you, Madam Moderator, Ms. Naomi Francis, our Press Secretary. Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister, Honorable Dr. Horace Chang, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of National Security, Honorable Favour Williams, Minister of Education and Youth, Senator the Honorable Aubin Hill, Minister of Industry, Investment and Commerce. I have to make a deliberate attempt not to say MEGJC. Honorable Robert Morgan, Minister without Portfolio in the Office of the Prime Minister. Other members of Cabinet and Ministers of State who are with us virtually, as well as other senior public officials on the virtual platform. Excellencies, the resident heads of diplomatic missions and heads of international organizations also joining us virtually. Mrs. Maureen Dwyer, Acting Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Education and Youth. Professor the Honorable Orlando Pattison, Chairman of the Education Transformation Commission. Other members of the Commission and of the staff of the Commission's Secretariat. Other attendees, especially our most valued stakeholders in the education sector, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I extend to you a warm good morning to all the specially invited participants in this important official launch ceremony for the public release of the report of the Prime Minister's High-Level Commission on Education Transformation that was appointed by the Prime Minister and approved by the Cabinet. Today, we recognize this activity as the completion of the essential cycle of the work of the Commission, especially tasked at another similar launch ceremony held here in this very room, Wednesday, July 22, 2020, to commence its critical and timely deliberations. The Commission was established to comprehensively review and assess Jamaica's education system, including its structure, operation, and processes, and to recommend an action plan for further transformation of the system. The mandate under the terms of reference was an action plan to identify any specific legislative, policy, structural, or other changes necessary to create a world-class educational system geared to enabling Jamaicans to fulfill their potential. As a former permanent secretary in the Ministry of Education, under the leadership of the then Education Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, I am among the converted when the Prime Minister reiterates that developing the skill base and human capital required for Jamaica to compete successfully in the 21st century global economy must be a national imperative. I therefore look forward to the pivotal role of the findings and recommendations of the Commission's report to the progress in the execution of policy elaboration and programming in the national education system and to the advance of universal learning. I know that members of the Commission, in carrying out their mandate, ably supported by the work of the Secretariat, headed by Ms. Trudy Deans, diligently reviewed national and international public education models and good contemporary practices that promote an increase in the educational productivity and student performance. I take the opportunity to commend their voluntary and collaborative service to the Jamaican education sector and to the citizens of Jamaica, and especially to our young people. We can anticipate that the study and adoption of the salient contents will have long-term effects on the machinery of educational governance and in the delivery of learning and training objectives. These will undoubtedly impact positively the key role of human capital in the achievement of our sustainable development goals. So, as we make manifest today the public record of the outcome of the laudable civil society partnership evident in this report, I am excited. I congratulate the Prime Minister on his foresight and on the tangible tool now made available to us as we anticipate the implementation of the recommendations which are aimed at improving the status of our education system. I have now declared my pleasure in witnessing this moment, and now I ask you to join me in invoking divine blessings and gratitude as witnesses to the meaningful work accomplished and on the most important critical work ahead of us. Let us pray. O God, our eternal Father, the Divine One, Lord, we give you thanks for the privilege that you have given us to serve your country and to serve your people at this time in our various roles. Lord, you have appointed us and you have sent us to go ahead and to do your work. And today, Lord, we want to present to you all those who participated, the chairman and the other members of the commission, the Secretariat and its membership. Lord, we give thanks and we present to you our Prime Minister and his cabinet, Lord Jesus, and other members of the political directorate, the leader of the opposition and his members, Lord, because it takes all of us, everyone, Father, to do your work here and to ensure, Lord Jesus, that your people will benefit. And, oh God, as we see today, to the launch of this report, we pray, oh God, that you'll continue to inspire your leaders with wisdom and vision, Lord, to do what is right, particularly in this time with the many challenges that the education system faces. We ask now, God, that this report will be implemented effectively and according to your divine will, because, Lord, we know that it is your desire that we should all learn about you, to acquire the wisdom that is required to continue your work on this part of the vineyard. So into your hand now we present the proceedings of this launch. And Holy Spirit, we ask that you will descend upon us and that in the end, your name will be glorified and you will be well pleased. Take control now, we pray, because we ask in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Permanent Secretary Audrey Sewell here at the Office of the Prime Minister, giving an overview and, of course, offering prayers on the proceedings here. Well, the report of the Prime Minister's High-Level Commission on Education Transformation is buttressed on transforming our education system to enable all Jamaicans to fulfill their potential and contribute to Jamaica's development in the 21st century. At this time at the wicket, leading the education charge for Cabinet is the Minister, the Honourable Favour Williams, who will now address us. Minister Williams, good morning.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, Naomi Francis, Press Secretary, Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, and Minister of National Security, Dr. Chang, Senator the Honorable Aubin Hill, Minister of Industry, Investment, and Commerce, Honorable Robert Nesta Morgan, Minister without Portfolio, Office of the Prime Minister, Honorable Members of Cabinet, Ministers of State, as well as other senior public officials on the virtual platform, Mrs. Audrey Sewell, PS with many hats, Excellencies, the resident heads of diplomatic missions and heads of international organizations also joining us virtually, Mrs. Maureen Dwyer, our own acting Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Education and Youth, and of course online, we do have Dr. Kassan Troop, our acting Chief Education Officer. Professor the Honorable Orlando Patterson, Chairman of the Education Transformation Commission, other members of the Commission, and of the staff of the Commission Secretariat, other attendees, especially the stakeholders in the field of education, our boards, our principals, our teachers and administrators, members of the private sector, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, Jamaicans all, good morning. There is no better indication of how highly we as Jamaicans prioritize education than the fact that today Jamaica is among the top 20% of nations in the share of its national income and annual government budget devoted to this sector. Yet despite this investment, despite the prioritization, there has been a failure of the education system to deliver in a broad-based, nation-building way students who are performing at or above their grade level. On any school day prior to the start of the pandemic, 17%, or approximately 39,000 children of primary school age are absent from school. This is twice the world's average. At the high school level, only 28% of our high school students pass 5 or more subjects, including English and mathematics. These are but a few of the findings highlighted in this report from the Commission entitled The Reform of Education in Jamaica 2021 report, being launched here today. We in Jamaica know that prior to this report today, there have been several others. There was the 2004 Task Force on Educational Reform, followed by the Education System Transformation Program, followed by the 2012 National Education Strategic Plan of the Ministry, to name a few such efforts. What I do know is that when you read this report and those of decades past, you will realize that there have been many good, many sound recommendations in them. And yes, there has been some efforts at implementation and at addressing the issues in the curriculum, teaching and learning support, school capacity, and state health and nutrition, special needs, both gifted and differently abled. So for me today, this Reform of Education in Jamaica 2021 report comes at an opportune time. It has 54 prioritized recommendations, spanning governance, early childhood education, teaching, curriculum, and teacher training, the tertiary sector, technical and vocational education and training, TVET, infrastructure and technology, and finance. In its 342 pages, this report takes a serious, holistic approach to educational reform. I know that across the school network, our boards, our principals, our teachers, and administrative staff want to see marked improvement in student outcomes. Across Jamaica, I know that it is the desire of every Jamaican to see their children excel in whatever field of study, academics, TVET, creative works, etc., etc. Yet it appears we have approached the implementation of these very good recommendations of these studies with less than full commitment. I would call it half-heartedness. For the most part, we've shied away from the recommendations that would improve the education sector. So how else do you explain a recommendation from over a decade ago to create a licensing environment for teachers that would uplift the professionalization of teachers? How do you explain why in 2021 that has not been implemented? This report today stresses the importance of getting the Jamaica Teaching Council Bill passed. How do you explain a key recommendation coming out of the 2004 report some 18 years ago, that it would be significantly impactful to the education sector to extend the length of the schooling experience from 11 years to 13 years? How do you explain the resistance to this recommendation from some quarters for these additional educational opportunities for our young people who graduate at grade 11 with a few and sometimes no CSEC subjects? Prime Minister, I don't believe we're serious about educational reform. Together with the senior policymaking group at the Ministry of Education and Youth, we will map out a work plan complete with timelines and accountability for the recommendations in this report. The engagement of the staff at the ministry will be key to have them become the process owners and live, breathe, and implement the recommendations in this report. Based on my almost 16 years at the ministry, 16 months, I know that there are many dedicated and committed persons at the Central Ministry, in its regions, and across its many entities who want to see a reversal of the chronic underachievement of a large number of students, meaning those who are performing well below their grade level. So this is the backdrop. This is the context in which I am placing the Jamaica Education Transformation Commission, the Reform of Education in Jamaica 2021 report, authored by Professor the Honorable Orlando Patterson, OM, Chairman, and the members of the Commission. It is an excellent report, and one that if we faithfully and diligently implement the many recommendations they will begin to show dramatic results, short-term as well as long-term. And again, I say, Prime Minister, my only concern is that Jamaicans may not be ready for some of these recommendations, despite the fact that report after report speak to their importance and the impact they will make on the education system if implemented. If you read the entire 342 pages of the long report, Prime Minister, I have read the entire 342 pages of this report, and I am committed to its implementation and want to say to the people of Jamaica, if you are serious about a real, holistic, multi-year reform of the education sector, guided by the recommendations of this report, I am the minister. If you're not serious, I honestly submit that I might not be the one, as this needs to be a national effort of all stakeholders, all across Jamaica. So, Prime Minister, I believe the first task of the ministry is to publish in a way that is easily understood by all Jamaicans the 54 prioritized recommendations and the sub-recommendations. I know that these are all neatly laid out on page 218 to page 227 of the report. However, we have to increase the accessibility of this information to all Jamaicans. And so we will use all the platforms available to us, including the ones that we know that Jamaicans use every day in order to get this information out. This, in my opinion, will allow Jamaicans to monitor and track the implementation of these recommendations and their impact. By doing this, we will engage all Jamaicans in this most important of endeavors, that of nurturing the creativity that exists in all our children. To Professor Orlando Patterson and members of the Commission, thank you for the countless hours. Thank you for this roadmap. We will honor the hours of work poured into this report by implementing the recommendations. Thank you, Prime Minister, for your foresight in commissioning this commission. You just made my job a whole lot easier. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister of Education and Youth, the Honourable Favour Williams, publicly declaring her commitment to ensuring that the recommendations of this Education Transformation Commission will be implemented as soon as, of course, the Prime Minister gives his go-ahead and charge to do so. You know, the Prime Minister was very, very methodological and thoughtful, strategic even, in looking at exactly what is required to shake up, so to speak, the education sector. He's always said that to meet the fourth industrial revolution, we have to do things in a revolutionary manner. And so he looked far and wide and found Professor Orlando Patterson, a Jamaican whose reputation precedes him. In fact, he's widely read at the universities and high schools across, not just universities in Jamaica, but across the globe. And Professor Patterson took on this job with a lot of commitment. There are hours and hours of meeting, not just in Jamaica, but online, to ensure that despite COVID, the work continued. And so, ladies and gentlemen, to present and take us through a lot of the recommendations and the process that was involved, may I introduce to you Professor the Honorable Orlando Patterson, OMCD, Chairman of the Commission, joining us from Boston, Massachusetts this morning to bring us through the report. Prof, good morning to you, and can you unmute as you prepare to speak with us and go through your presentation slides?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Francis. Good morning, everyone. Most Honorable Prime Minister, and Your Holiness, Honorable Minister of Education, Ms. Favour Williams, Honorable Horace Chang, members of Parliament, Excellencies, honored guests, members of the press, and fellow commissioners, ladies and gentlemen. It is, I must begin by saying, a great honor and a great privilege, not just for me, but I think I can speak on behalf of all the commissioners I've worked with to have been asked to do this task. Education is central to the realization of our aim or hope of becoming a modern, developed society. It is also critical, not just for our economic hopes, but also for our dream of creating a harmonious society free of conflict, free of crime. Education serves both purposes. And therefore, one can think of no greater honor than to have been asked to develop a program and a set of recommendations for the transformation of the education system of our country. I want to pay special thanks to my fellow commissioners. It's been not just a pleasure, but a learning experience. And for me, a return home to my alma mater, given the number of persons who are or were connected with this university, our great university. But we worked together diligently, cooperatively, over a period of 18 months in which I got to know them very well. And I can say that over the many years that I've been involved with academic and policy work, I cannot recall an experience, a collaborative experience, as rewarding as this one. And I really want to thank these commissioners who will become my colleagues over the past 18 months. I'd also like to thank the many people who have assisted us in our effort. The Ministry of Education and its officers has been very cooperative, very helpful in providing us with the statistics we need and with the information that we've sought. I'm happy to report that all members of the public, all the professionals, all the experts we consulted eagerly expressed the wish and came through in participating in this venture. I is especially thankful for those who agreed to be co-opted to work with the subcommittees. They all gave up their time and their expertise gratis. I'd also like to thank members of the international community who have been extremely cooperative in helping us, in guiding us, in providing vital information, data, expertise. In particular, Ms. Cynthia Harps, who is the lead education specialist at IDB, Dr. Deetha Bierman, lead economist at IDB, Ms. Marika Kagashima, and Dr. Rebecca Tortella of UNICEF, who throughout the 18 months of our work were extremely helpful. Not only were they helpful in giving of their own advice and working with the subcommittee, but UNICEF actually conducted a national survey of our students to get their views of how education should change. This, by the way, is the first reform of education that I know of anywhere in the world, which consulted and which has the views of a representative sample of our students, which we took account of. And thank you very much, Ms. Kawashima and Dr. Tortella for making this possible. So let me get this going. Our work focused on the entire range of education, or the entire education sector and all its many parts. Our commission took account of the excellent recommendations of the previous task force on education of 2004. And we not only learned from it, but we examined the extent to which its recommendations were implemented. And I should also report that we went a bit further. The Prime Minister's mandate included two aspects of education which were not in the 2004 report, which is to examine the role of early childhood education and to examine the role of the tertiary sector. As this slide shows, we carefully examined the performance of our students. For the first time, we were able to analyze the exam performance of students over a nearly 20-year period. Thanks to the Ministry of Education for providing this data for us. We looked at the assessment and evaluation of school. There can be no significant reform without knowing where you are. What are the problems? What are the difficulties which we have to overcome? How are our students performing? And that was one of our first tasks. We also look carefully at the method of evaluation. One of our major tasks was to look at the governance and accountability in the system. And that section was very professionally and brilliantly chaired by Dr. Dana Morris Dixon, who unfortunately is not able to join us today because of illness, and we wish her well and that she recovers soon. But her work was critical. So is the work of the early childhood education sector. And Dr. Vaughan Sams of the University of the West Indies basically did most of the work on this. The Teaching and Curriculum and Teacher Training Subcommittee had the biggest task. It explored all aspects of teaching, curriculum, and training. And the largest number of our recommendations are in this sector. And I want to offer my deepest thanks to the extraordinary chairing of this committee by Professor Michael Taylor, the Dean of the Faculty of Sciences and Technology at UWI. The tertiary sector was chaired also by Dr. Dana Morris, who went well beyond the call of duty in taking on this task, in addition to the major task of exploring the state of education. Infrastructure and technology was chaired by Ms. Erica Simmons, and she and her team did an excellent job in looking at this important area of education, or buildings, or grounds, how we house our students, how we maintain them, and so on. The finance subcommittee, obviously how we pay for all this is critical. And we are very fortunate in having one of the nation's leading experts on finance and finance education, Professor David Tennant, who co-chaired the finance committee with another important talent, someone from the private sector. And so we have a nice sort of balance between the private sector and the education sector in chairing our subcommittee, Mr. Jeffrey Hall, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Jamaica Producers Group. We should mention one other subcommittee, the Technical and Vocational Education Subcommittee, which is chaired by Ms. Floretta Plummer, former principal of Nago Head Primary School. We did, halfway through our deliberations, realize that this was a major undertaking, since it involved a reconsideration of the entire technical and vocational training, which meant looking at HEART, re-examining how HEART is operating, especially in light of recent report from the Auditor General, but also the degree to which what HEART does has to be integrated into the regular school system. This is a major undertaking, and at the recommendation of the Prime Minister, we've decided that we need another phase of the commission to do this. And so immediately after this report today, we will begin phase two, which will be looking at solely technical and vocational education, the incorporation of STEAM learning and into the education system. That will be done with the kind collaboration and support of the Inter-American Development Bank, which has already agreed to do this, and which has already identified a team of experts who will be assisting us in this major undertaking. And for that reason, then, we've delayed the many excellent recommendations of the Technical and Vocational Education Subcommittee, which will be folded into the phase two recommendations on technical education. We were guided by certain fundamental principles in our work. And our guiding motto is we reach for excellence. With reach being a kind of acronym, if you like, each letter representing one of our fundamental principles. Results, educational results is going to guide everything we do. Now that may seem self-evident, but many education systems, because they're so large and complex, end up with other factors becoming more important. What's going on in the ministry, careers, and so on. from now on, at least on the basis of our recommendations, everything we do will be judged in terms of what are the results in the performance of our students, not in the number of schools, not in the particular kinds of examination systems we have, and so on. But quite simply, how is this going to influence how our schools perform? E stands for one of the other fundamental principles that guide all our subcommittees: equity. Jamaica has an inequitous educational system. We have, in fact, two systems of education, which I'll get to shortly. But the rewards of the massive amount of funds, as the minister noted, which we spend on education, go disproportionately to some students and not to others. Equity is going to be one of the guiding principles of our work from now on. Accountability, the A in reach, we've found to be one of the fundamental problems that beset the entire system of education. If you're not accountable, if you know you will not be held accountable, then you do not reach for excellence. You do not report problems. You do not try to fix problems because there are no consequences if you do or you don't. Accountability is a problem we've found throughout the system. And that's going to become one of the cardinal principles. Coherence is a principle which has been noted internationally among education experts. It refers to the need to coordinate all the different elements of the education system. All education systems tend to be extremely complex. Education is the largest organization in the country here, but that's true all over the world. And things get lost. There is a great deal of redundancy in many educational systems. There's a great deal of one system working against another. There is the problem of maybe making building structures which are not needed where they are. There's a problem of how schools work with each other, how you maximize the teaching resources you have. And so coordination is one element of coherence. Collaboration, working together, this is vital. This is vital among teachers who, one way in which we will be solving the problem of teacher shortage will be through collaboration. But more importantly, as I'll explain shortly, collaboration is going to become a central principle in the teaching in the classroom. Harmonization refers to another fundamental principle to which we reach. Harmonization internally refers to getting the different levels of the system from the pre-primary through the primary, through the secondary, and the tertiary working together. That may seem obvious. It doesn't happen. Are we spending too much on one level, let's say the tertiary? Are we spending too little on another level? We have to harmonize, and I'll have more to say about this. But there's also external harmonization of the entire system with the private sector and with civil society, the social sector. One of the big problems, noted already, by the way, in the 2004 task force, noted in the Vision 30 report, a major problem is that there's a lack of harmonization between what is being produced in the educational sector with what is needed in the private sector and what is also needed more generally in a society. We aim to bring about that harmonization. We aim to produce the kind of skilled labor force that is needed by the private sector. We need to produce the kind of citizens that will be needed for those working in civil society in the attempt at reducing our problems. So let me just very briefly go through these recommendations. I cannot go through the large number of recommendations we have. This would take me all day and tomorrow. I'll just hit on some of the main themes in each of these sections. But let me begin by noting the crisis we are in. Crisis of poor performance. The World Bank calls this a learning crisis. The fact that we have achieved success in placing students in schools, but they're not performing well. There's an organizational crisis in the ministry, and there is a crisis of COVID pandemic. 3 crises. Let me begin with COVID. Our commission began its work several months after COVID struck. And that prevented us from doing certain things which would have been necessary under normal circumstances, such as visiting schools. However, COVID did have some silver linings. One of them is that we had to work through Zoom, which meant that we were able to meet with a much larger number of stakeholders than we would had we been meeting in person. COVID also did something else. It forced the teaching profession and the ministry to acquire the skills of remote learning in a hurry. The reluctance that existed before acquiring these skills simply vanished. And so in short order, our teachers and our administrators acquired a considerable level of skill in remote learning and teaching. And we are hoping, as other countries have done, including the United States, by the way, but other developing countries have done, is to take advantage of this, if you like, forced acquisition of skills in building back better. COVID has been a calamity for our students, as you know, and it has exacerbated the existing problems of equity. The cost of recovery will be great. So the World Bank estimates that the total cost of recovery will be something in the order of $2.5 billion Jamaican annually for 2 years. But we'd better do it because the cost of inaction, the World Bank estimates, will be in the region of $5.5 billion US, which will be unevenly borne by the population. So we can choose between spending this extra amount upfront now of only 2.5 billion Jamaicans to make up back for what we've lost. Or we can not do it or not do it efficiently and end up with a final cost of 5.5 billion US. It's a no-brainer what we should do. The learning crisis, which the Honorable Minister of Education mentioned, is serious. The more we dug into it, the more serious it appeared. It's best reflected in the results of the 2019 primary exit profile results. A majority of students at the end of primary school remain illiterate and innumerate. And most are leaving secondary schools with no marketable skills. In more detail, the PEP 2019 results show that almost 60% of students were failing in mathematics, that only 33%, could not read, that 56% couldn't write or barely scratch out a sentence, that in what's called research, which is just the ability to identify what is the main topic in a sentence, in a simple sentence, almost 60% could not find what the topic is in the sentence. This is serious. This is after spending billions and billions of dollars on education. This is after all the energy we've put into it. Something is not working. This should not be so after all the effort we've put in since our independence. The World Bank has summed it all up in one of its metrics, which is the following, that Jamaican students can expect to complete 11.4 years of schooling by the time they reach 18 years of age. But controlling for quality, taking into account of just what it is they've learned, this is equivalent to only 7.1 years of learning, a learning gap of 4.3 years. That summarizes the disastrous situation which we face. One other point to note about the state of performance of our kids is the problem of underperformance of boys. Now, I emphasize underperformance of boys, not overperformance of girls. Underperformance of boys, reflected in this graph and in this other graph here. In mathematics, well over 60% are failing. And the same goes for science and language arts, less so in social studies. Compared with girls, we're doing much better. One of the first things you do in reforming a system is to evaluate. And we're fortunate in having a very good evaluation system in the National Education Inspectorate, ably led by Dr. Doyle. And that's one of the major successes, by the way, of the 2004 task force. This, however, this approach uses traditional methods of observation and examination. In recent years, another metric has been used, which is the value-added approach to evaluating schools. And the commission decided to add this method, not to replace the traditional method, but to complement it. And what this approach does, and you can read all about it in the policy brief devoted especially to this, is that it looks not at exam results, but at what the value added by teachers and by the school over and above what students bring to the school with their own resources, their backgrounds. In schools, the students in schools vary radically in Jamaica between those schools and St. Andrews and elsewhere, where students are coming from middle and upper middle class backgrounds. They've scored well in their GSAT examination. They live in homes in which they have their own rooms and books, and parents who are highly educated who can read to them, who can hire tutors for them, and so on. These students are bringing to the school an extraordinary amount of resources, and they're bound to succeed. As opposed to schools in Tivoli Gardens, in rural Clarendon, or what have you, where kids from peasant families are coming in living in homes, 6 to a single room, hot. Parents are semi-literate or just too dog tired to help. Obviously, no tutoring or what have you. And the point here is that you have to distinguish between schools that take such students and at the end work wonders in developing these students, bringing out the best in them. Now, the reason why exams results are not reliable is that a school may be just fantastic in what it does, in bringing students up to a point where 40%, only 50% pass the CSEC. And looking only at the exam, you may say, what's that? This school is failing. Only 50% pass, 50% fail. But if you knew what the background of the students were, if you knew what the resources are that these students are, or lack of resources, you'd immediately say, this school is doing a fantastic job, because what the value added model does is to say, look, given the resources, these students should, in fact, no more than about 20% of these students should be passing the CSEC, but you end up with 50%. That difference is a value added. So we've explained it at great length. We will be using this to complement the traditional approach. Let me point out that several countries use only the value-added approach. England, for example, uses only the value-added approach. We've decided to combine the value-added approach with the traditional exam approach to create a composite index by which we evaluate our secondary schools. And we've done something else, which I'm hoping the Commission hopes education will take seriously. Because of the extreme inequality in our schools, it makes no sense comparing all the schools in one lot. We have 2 systems of secondary schools, a traditional system of 42 schools, which provide world-class education to its students, compared with the best in the world. We have another system, the rest, the non-traditional. And it makes no sense lumping them all together, as is done annually as people report the exam results. The non-traditional schools always end up in the bottom last. We've decided to evaluate schools separately. And using this composite metric, which combines exam results with value added, we've come up with a ranking of schools which will surprise you very much. Just to whet your appetite and hope that you'd go and read the value-added policy brief. The 3 top schools in the nation, the secondary schools, are Glenmuir High School for girls, Glenmuir High School, which is co-educational, Wolmer's Girls School, and St. Jago High School. The top schools in the non-traditional, Dint Hill, Edwin Allen School. And we want to use that system, which I think is much fairer and which will indicate where to look for the real problems in the school, and not be misled simply by looking only at exam results. Okay, so that's one of our first major set of recommendations in terms of evaluation. I think it's a superior system, superior even to the system being used in England, which I think relies too heavily solely on value added. This combines both, as you'll see. Governance. The 2004 task force did have major recommendations on reforming the Ministry of Education. While many of the resource building structures that were recommended went into effect, the reorganization of the Ministry of Education did not take place. We are recommending a complete review of the system. We recommend an oversight committee to monitor implementation of recommendation, a strategic and organizational review of the entire system. We think it is critical that the system moves to the modern world in terms of the management information system that is needed, that is to prioritize data analytics and monitoring. And so we move from a 19th century system in which, if you want to know how is the school doing in Maypen or in Spalding, how are the teachers doing? How are the students performing? You ought to be able to go to a dashboard and in a few minutes get that information, rather than going to paper files and spending a whole day finding it. We need to modernize that system. We also need to prioritize the Department of School Services. Another important recommendation of the 2004 task force is this a complex issue, but it needs review. We need to review the role of the education officer, which is simply not being properly utilized right now. We want to change the whole idea of what an education officer is, as one who actually is actively involved in the schools, in suggesting reforms, and in helping to implement reforms. We have a lot to say about the school boards. School boards are a good idea, it's a democratic process, but right now there are major problems with the school boards in the way the members are selected. And we have several key recommendations about how this should be changed. The financial management of the system is also badly in need of change. So a better way of auditing the system. As you know, the Education Ministry has been in the news recently, and a lot of this goes toward governance issue and the financial management of the system. Accountability becomes a critical second major factor, and we have a whole range of recommendations to improve accountability immediately. A performance management framework for the senior team is essential. We need to improve the internal auditing unit to facilitate more frequent school auditing. The Jamaica Teaching Council bill is essential. Several of our subcommittees have emphasized this. This is critical. We'll get back to this. The movement of teachers. Again, both the governance committee and the teaching and curriculum committee are emphatic in that the system is too rigid. We have a system in which you may have an oversupply of teachers in one school and a desperate undersupply in another, but it becomes difficult to move from one to another. And hello? So legislative changes are another major area for change recommended by the governance committee, and this is critical. This is the minister, I was happy to see mention this. We have to amend the education regulations, great urgency. The Jamaica Teaching Council bill, Tertiary Education Commission bill, they all have to, the legislation is already there and it's been delayed for years and years. And this must be done, or in a sense, we're stuck. Because without these regulations, without these laws, we cannot move. So those are the many recommendations of the governance committee. As I said, I've only touched on the headlines. Early childhood education is fundamental. One of the major recommendations of our commission, which is supported by all the subcommittees, is that we have to reprioritize early education. One of the main findings of international studies in education is that the biggest bang you get for your buck in education is the buck you spend at early childhood education. Jamaica has, on paper, a large number of our students in early childhood, but these early childhood institutions are not well run, are poorly managed, poorly monitored. We do have the Early Childhood Commission, which has been working at this, and a tremendous amount of resources have been put into the Early Childhood Commission. We think it needs review. We think it needs to do more in terms of monitoring the existing early childhood education system, early childhood institutions. But more importantly, we think more resources will have to be spent. We'll have to shift resources from other parts of the system to this, because this is the foundation on which education exists. Work done not only by economists and education sociologists indicate the importance of early childhood education for later education, but also for later social behavior. As you know, we have a major crime problem. The problems of crime begin in the first 5 years of life. The Harvard Medical School team on early childhood and the developing brain has made it clear that what the child experiences in these first 5 years has a delayed effect on what happens later on. Whether a child at the age of 18 picks up a gun or picks up a pen depends on what happens in those first 5 years. So we will have to reallocate a substantial amount of resources to this sector. If it means taking it from the other levels, then we will have to do that. We have to make sure that when our children move from the early childhood period, they're entering the primary school ready to learn and not stunted. So this is one of our major recommendations, the details of which you can read, I hope, whichever one will look at this, because it may come as a surprise to some of you.
Prof? Oh dear, I think we lost the audio feed. Prof. Patterson, all right. Until we clear up the audio feed then, we thank Professor Orlando Patterson for his presentation. And now, ladies and gentlemen, until we get back that feed, certainly the Commission did a fantastic job looking at the recommendations and, of course, spending a lot of time dealing with meeting, especially with all the stakeholders involved. All right, so let's see if we can rejoin Professor Patterson. Prof, are you hearing us any at all?
I'm hearing you.
We lost you for a minute.
Yeah, hello, yeah?
My apologies. We lost you for a minute due to some technical difficulties. If you would wrap, and of course, right after, then the Prime Minister will be on. I'm sorry, Prof, can you unmute? I'm not hearing you.
I've unmuted. Can you hear me?
Fantastic. Hearing you again, sir.
Okay. I have to wrap up soon. So let me just emphasize, as I just did, the significance of early childhood education. Our teaching curriculum and teacher training system needs a complete overhaul. the way we train our teachers, and the way our teachers teach in the school. We'll have to move from one in which the teacher stands and delivers and the students passively receive. We have scores of recommendations about the teaching profession, about teacher training and teaching itself, as well as curriculum and assessment as we move towards the realization of or incorporation of STEAM education. The important out-of-school factors are going to be, we have several recommendations about how we get parents and the community more involved. And we, of course, took account of COVID and have many recommendations in that regard. The tertiary sector has been in the news recently, and we have several major recommendations about changing the Education Act, about greater coordination, reducing redundancy in the system, and also with respect to how we finance education. And we have a long list of ways in which we can increase the amount of funds going into education from the private sector, as well as facilitating teacher loans. And we have a long list of recommendations on how we can change the loan bureau. The finance is, of course, complements all of this. The emphasis is on equity, and adequacy, efficiency, and equity becomes critical. The need to shift, reallocate resources from one sector of the system to another. And our emphasis is on helping poor kids, because we see that one of the main reasons for the high dropout rate is that kids do not have the money. Parents do not have the money to send the kids to school. We want to improve the school feeding program and the PATH program, and revisit the whole no-feed policy. We also finally want to establish a child opportunity fund, an idea which is we got from New Zealand and other places, in which a fund is established for each child at birth, in which the parents and the government contribute to that fund, so that when they reach the age of 18, they can use it for tertiary training of various kinds, technical or academic. So sorry it took so long, but as I said, I could go on for the rest of the day. But please read the abbreviated list of recommendations if you have the time. We also have an abridged version of 75 pages, which gives you the rationale for all of this. And for the experts who will be implementing this, there is the large unabridged account, which goes into fine details. We don't just throw out these recommendations. We explain the rationale for them, and we explain the best ways of implementing them. And we're looking forward to the full cooperation of the ministry as we launch this program. Thank you very much.
Professor Orlando Patterson, thank you so much. If the presentation, which was very detailed, and of course you did indicate that you abbreviated it a while ago. If it's anything to go by, we see the passion and the level of meticulousness that you've brought to the process, along with the other members of the committee. So thank you so much, Professor. We eagerly look forward to going through the entire full report, and of course the abbreviated version as well. Just a note to all those who are listening both online and on our Zoom that it will be available on the OPM website very shortly, immediately after this function. And so now, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the man who had the vision in the first instance to look again at Jamaica's education system to ensure that we meet the challenges of not just the fourth industrial revolution, but that and beyond, to ensure that our people are well equipped. And of course, having served in education prior, he's passionate about education. Ladies and gentlemen, the Prime Minister of Jamaica, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness.
the Honorable Favour Williams, Minister of Education, Senator the Honorable Aubin Hill, Minister of Industry, Investment and Commerce, the Honorable Robert Morgan, Minister without portfolio in the Office of the Prime Minister, other members of the Cabinet and Ministers of State, as well as other senior public officials who have joined us virtually, Excellencies, the resident heads of diplomatic missions and heads of international organizations also joining us virtually, our Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Audrey Sewell, and our Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Mrs. Maureen Dwyer, Professor, the Honorable Orlando Pattison, Chairman of the Education Transformation Commission, and other members of the Commission and the staff of the Commission's Secretariat, attendees, especially the stakeholders in the field of education, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Let me first wish everyone present and those joining virtually a new year filled with hope, health, happiness, peace, and, of course, prosperity. This is a very special year, our Diamond Jubilee, as we celebrate 60 years of independence. During this period, despite the challenges, we have achieved and can be proud of many successes. Most importantly, we have opportunity. The opportunity to continue to build on the successes, learn from, and address our past failures, charting the way and partnering for social and economic success. With this in mind, there can be no better way to start this year than to launch the transformation of our education system. I want to thank Professor Pattison and all the members of the Commission for devoting their time, energy, knowledge, and passion to undertake this extremely important, comprehensive review of the nation's education system. I also want to thank the many stakeholders who engaged with the Commission and presented their thoughts, views, and suggestions. The last major comprehensive review of our national public education system was undertaken in 2004 with the Task Force on Educational Reform chaired by Dr. Ray Davis. The terms of reference for the current review were even broader than those for the 2004 task force. We thought it imperative to include early childhood education, focusing on the pedagogical development of our young minds, as well as tertiary education. As a follow-up to this report from the Commission, I have asked that Professor Pattison and his team lead a comprehensive review of the organization and output of the Jamaican education and technical and vocational training systems, including an institutional review of the Hart NSTA Trust, and to recommend changes to improve its effectiveness. The review will look at the demand side of TVET, considering how to enable the Jamaican TVET system to better meet the needs of young people, employers, government policy priorities, and the economy, as well as the supply side, considering how to build capacity and capability. This will include transformation of the Hart NSTA Trust, including options for institutional change and reform. We expect that this review will be completed in approximately 6 months. Some may ask, why the necessity of another comprehensive review of the education system? As the Commission says in its report, a number of the recommendations from the last review in 2004 have not yet been implemented. The Minister of Education pointed out a few. It was necessary to undertake a fresh review because of two main reasons. Firstly, in the nearly 2 decades since 2004, the world has seen massive changes. Many of the things we take for granted today did not exist in 2004. The iPhone, Twitter, WhatsApp, the Tesla model, what is it, SR3 or whatever it is, didn't exist. The pace and direction of technological change and its impact on society is revealed by examining the list of most valuable companies in the world by market value in 2004 versus today. So if you looked at the most valuable companies in the world, top 10, let's say, in 2004, you had General Electric, essentially a manufacturing operation. You had ExxonMobil. You had Microsoft. At number 4, Pfizer. At number 5, Citi, a financial conglomerate. You had at 6, Walmart. At 7, British Petroleum. At 8, AIG. I believe that would be an insurance financial outfit. At number 9, Intel. And at number 10, Bank of America. So that was the composition in 2004. In 2020, 22, Apple, Microsoft, Saudi Aramco, it's an oil company, Alphabet, that's Google, Amazon, Tesla, Meta, Facebook, Berkshire Hathaway, an investment company, NVIDIA, a technology company again, and Taiwan Semiconductor, technology manufacturing outfit. Only one company, Microsoft, that was in the top 10 in 2004 is in the top 10 today. That's how radically things have changed. And by the way, the companies that I have just listed in 2004 and today, all of them have a gross production value multiple times the GDP of Jamaica. Several multiple times the GDP of Jamaica. And in 18 years, the production and output values and market values have changed in 18 years. It would be interesting to do a similar exercise to see what were the top 10 companies in Jamaica in 2004 and what are the top 10 companies in Jamaica in 2022. Yes, there would have been some changes, but not fundamental. So, in 2004, there were 2 of the top 10 were in technology. So 2 companies in 2004 were in technology. Today, it's 7 of the top 10 that are in technology. This shows us how fast the world is changing, the direction of the change towards technology, consumer demand, and social and economic value creation. I'll stop at that point. Where is value being created and where is it being stored? It is in technology. Where is Jamaica in the value creation and in the store of the value? These are, high-level questions, obviously. Persons struggling to survive day to day may not mean much to them. But it means much to your struggle to survive. And it is because we have not firmly planted ourselves in the value creation and value storage while we have this day-to-day struggle to survive. We get caught up fighting the little things and miss the big things, which is why this government will never be distracted by the noise in the market. We have always been focused on the major things that are going to transform this country. It will not happen overnight. But in our 60th year, we must be satisfied that we planted ourselves to grow and blossom as an independent, politically and economically, and prosperous, fair, and equitable nation. We are now firmly in the midst of a global technological revolution, the fourth industrial revolution. I've said this over and over again. That is fundamentally changing the way we live, work, and relate to one another. This revolution is transforming the way children and young people access information, communicate, learn, and even play. It is on a scale, scope, and complexity unlike we have experienced before. The technological revolution that is underway is much more than just computerization and digitization. It represents the convergence of four groups of technologies: information technology, biotechnology, nanotechnology, and cognitive technologies. In other words, it is the merging of the capabilities of both human and machine. We are in the era of artificial intelligence, virtual and augmented reality, biometrics, genome editing, renewable energy, 3D printing, autonomous vehicles, and the Internet of Things. Technology is now truly embedded and integrated into our daily living and is impacting on our physical and mental nature and how we as human beings behave. And it is impacting now more than any other time in the history of civilization. Jamaica, as a nation state, as we understand it today, did not exist during much of the first industrial revolution. A simple explanation offered by the World Economic Forum is that the first industrial revolution is widely taken to be the shift from reliance on animals, human effort, and biomass as primary sources of energy to the use of fossil fuels and mechanical power as the driving force behind development. Indeed, Jamaica as a colony then was reliant on forced labor and the abhorrent system of slavery which procured it to power its sugar economy, and therefore it was always doomed to fail. In the wake of the first industrial revolution. So Jamaica as a colony was never a priority for industrialization. And you can read, Capitalism and Slavery, which outlined the thesis as to why the slave economy and the plantation economy failed. The second industrial revolution occurred between the end of the 19th century and the first 2 decades of the 20th century and brought major breakthroughs in the form of electricity distribution, both wireless and wired communication, improved science in agriculture and health, and new forms of power generation. Again, Jamaica missed out or lagged much of these developments. The third industrial revolution began in the 1950s with the development of digital systems, communications, and rapid advances in computing power, which have enabled new ways of generating, processing, and sharing information. Again, Jamaica missed out on this era of global development. Though it could be argued that during this period, Jamaica saw significant investments in bauxite, tourism, agriculture, and infrastructure that would see us having great prospects, similar to that of Singapore at the time of our independence. For various reasons, we have struggled to keep apace our economic and social development, and we have not managed to align our education system and the economic imperatives to take advantage of the opportunities of industrialization. Now, there is a fourth wave of industrialization taking place in the world. New products and technology defined as artificial intelligence and cyber-physical products. There are also new global trade dynamics that could see massive shifts in supply chains and production hubs. Jamaica must not stand by the wayside of history, once more watching the vehicles of opportunities pass us by. There is much work to be done to create the Jamaican with the highest level of socio-emotional intelligence, competencies, and skills that would enable us individually and as a people to accomplish great and complex tasks productively with a growth mindset while managing our emotions in social transactions, to resolve conflicts without violence and deviance, with pro-social and rational attitudes. We must transform Jamaicans into 21st century citizens, creatives, and workers. The World Economic Forum, in its Future of Jobs report 2020, estimated that by 2025, just 3 years from now, 85 million jobs may be displaced by technology. Displaced. Google has an assistant that is so well trained, it's artificially intelligent, that it can make an appointment for you. And those of you who use Siri would be amazed at the response. And of course, if you have, the Amazon Alexa. So simple jobs are going to be replaced. Simple jobs require simple skills. And if you only have simple skills, you may not have a job. That is the reality. So as I've said, there are people, what is he talking about? I have to live out, or figure out how I'm going to live today. But it's because we haven't focused on these higher level issues why it is difficult for you to live today. It is important that the entire nation buys into this vision and be willing to put aside the petty political differences which have sometimes subverted and delayed the important changes that need to be made. Why has it taken 10 years to have the JCT bill, the Jamaica Teaching Council? We know that there are schools that are underpopulated. Why haven't we closed them and restructured that for greater efficiency? However, the good news is that the report also said that 97 million new roles, jobs, will emerge that are more adapted to the new division of labor between humans, machines, and algorithms. So it is not abandoning people without skills. It must be how we retrain and uplift and change the mindset to get the new skills to take advantage of the many more jobs that will be created. We cannot leave that up to chance. And the present form of our education system will not deliver it because it is not focused on that. It is largely missed focused, if you want to quote a term. It has to be focused on output and results. It has to be focused on excellence. It has to be student-centered. So we need to urgently transform our education system so that our children have the skills to participate in this revolution. If we adapt and transform ourselves to embrace the changes, we can capitalize on the opportunities. However, if we do not change and adapt to where the world is going, we risk once more of being left behind and marginalized. For us to become relevant and compete in the 21st century global economy, we must fundamentally transform ourselves. STEAM disciplines, that is science, technology, engineering, and we're not leaving out arts and mathematics, and coding are at the heart of the global technological revolution. We must truly embrace science and technology as drivers of economic transformation and growth. There are many Jamaicans, particularly young Jamaicans, who embrace technology, consider themselves tech natives and tech savvy. But this is not good enough. We need to make the mental transition from seeing ourselves merely as consumers of technology to seeing ourselves as developers and creators of technology. Some may say this is an audacious vision for a small island like Jamaica. But we have a track record of punching above our weight globally. We are known for our world-beating athletes and our music and culture. Now, we must become known for being innovators and creators in science and technology. We must harness the same audacious spirit that makes Jamaica, as a small tropical country, bold enough to compete in the Winter Olympics, to believe that we too can compete with the best globally in the world. Not just in sports, not just in music, but in technology as well. This is something we have done, you know. There have been several groundbreaking Jamaican innovators. For example, how many of you recall Drs. Manley West and Albert Lockhart? They developed Canasol using cannabis long before cannabis became a thing for medicine. There is Dr. Cicely Williams. She discovered the child malnutrition syndrome called kwashiorkor. Dr. Thomas Philip Leckie. How many of you remember Dr. Leckie? He created a new breed of Jamaican cattle, the Jamaica Hope, the Jamaica Red, and the Jamaica Black. There is Dr. Paula Tennant. She developed a bioengineered papaya plant that is resistant to the papaya ring spot virus. I've named just a few. There are several others. But how many Jamaicans know about them? Do we project them to the world as part of our culture? Is technology part of our culture? Are these the people that we glorify? That we sing about? That we would want our children to emulate? But more than that, are these the people that we listen to? Or are we choosing to listen to nonsense, fake news, unresearched thoughts, irrational ideas and expressions? Are those our heroes? Are those the ones leading thoughts in our society? We have to be blamed because when we promote our culture, we don't see it in ourselves that Dr. Lecky and Dr. Manley West and Dr. Tennant should be promoted front and center as the people who can create value in our society for the benefit of all. Comes down largely to our education system and the absence of civics. So, as we celebrate our independence, this is what it means to be an independent nation. Are we placing value where it should be placed? So one of the most important changes as we celebrate our independence is to make the change in how we view ourselves. It is not just talk and symbolism. There are some definite things that we have to do to make our independence meaningful. Otherwise, you're just going to make changes and the conditions of the people remain the same. I am not about symbolic changes. I am about meaningful changes. And indeed, it is a struggle to get the average person struggling to survive to make the connection between the importance of these high-level changes and their daily lives, especially when these high-level changes are not going to result in changes immediately. So the challenge before us is to transform our education system so that it endows Jamaican boys and girls with not only the technical skills, but the self-confidence and belief that it is not beyond them to develop the next great innovation, the next Google, or the next Apple. Who knows, it may be Otaiti. It might be the next big technology thrust. And it could come from Jamaica. Right here. We have begun the transformation, but there is still a long way to go. The government has been taking deliberate steps to position Jamaica as a technology and innovation hub, the Silicon Valley of the region. We have recently launched the Coding in Schools program in partnership with the Amber Group and Digicel. Coding will be taught from grade 1 to grade 13 across all public schools, and our youth will acquire basic numeracy, language, and problem-solving skills, which are the prerequisites for coding. We are also moving forward with our plan to build 6 new STEM schools and 1 school focused on the performing arts. The second reason we need a comprehensive review and reset of our education is that Jamaica itself has also changed significantly since our last review in 2014. A number of our deep-rooted societal problems have only worsened. There has been an erosion in the moral fabric of our society and basic norms of decency and civility that once characterized us as Jamaicans. Even the most basic respect for the sanctity of human life appears to have been eroded. Verbal and physical abuse, vulgarity and barbarity, are becoming far too commonplace in our interpersonal interactions. We have socialized an entire generation into normalizing violence. And this is at the root of our epidemic of violence. If we are to have any hope of restoring the values, attitudes, and behavior that we once cherished as inherently Jamaican, they must form a central part of the education and socialization of our children. A key component of our educational curriculum must be focused on developing the socio-emotional intelligence, competencies, and skills that will enable us individually and as a people to accomplish great and complex tasks productively with a growth mindset while managing our emotions in social transactions to resolve conflict without violence and deviance. As a society, we must stop glorifying indiscipline, law-breaking, and irrational behavior. We must stop making an excuse for indiscipline and law-breaking that it is necessary for survival. Give a man a chance, no man. We are one of the most creative people on the planet. If we could channel that creativity and ingenuity that is applied to breaking laws and circumventing systems to more productive purposes, if everyone were following the rules, imagine what we could achieve as a people. If we think about the basic foundational literacies that an average citizen of Jamaica needs to function effectively in a modern society, we could look at these. We could look at language literacy, the ability to read and write and communicate in standard form. That has just disappeared. Standard form of communication is now being merged with other forms. And what that will do is narrow our scope to participate in the global economy. We have to have numeracy, or numbers literacy, the ability to perform basic mathematical calculations. We have to have science literacy, a basic knowledge of science, and this is very important, especially in the pandemic, to be able to make rational decisions about their own health, about their diet. And you know, we have, before the pandemic, we started a program trying to get Jamaicans to understand the lifestyle diseases. It got a little bit sidetracked, obviously, because the pandemic has refocused the government's efforts. But the lifestyle diseases have not gone away. In fact, they have probably gotten worse. And that is primarily a function, not just of our organization of our work and leisure, but also a function of what we choose to eat. There are some interesting theses as to why our diets are so high in starches and sugar, and the impact of that on hyperactivity and violence. And of course, the connection to our enslaved past. And we need to break that so that Jamaicans can take a far more enlightened view of what they eat. They can avoid the sugars and the carbohydrates and the fats. Take them in moderation. Do a little bit more exercise. because these lifestyle diseases are highly correlated with poverty. And the education system to help our people to think how to live better. Science literacy as well, to appreciate concepts about the environment. What does our consumption of certain goods and services do to the environment? How does our waste disposal attitudes affect our environment? That has to come through the education system. And to even appreciate concepts such as climate change. We need ICT literacy, the ability to use and interact with modern devices, computers, tablets, and phones. You know, the government and the banking sector, we have been speaking about the transformation of the banking sector to more digital and virtual formats. And there are many persons in Jamaica who are having a challenge with the transformation. We are used to going into a physical structure and handing over our cash to a person. There are many Jamaicans having a challenge with handing over their cash to an ATM. But even more than that, there are many Jamaicans who are having problems just going online to transact. And we will be moving with certainty and deliberate speed towards a digital economy. And we can't leave anybody behind, so we have to develop a strategy as to how to educate those who have this digital reluctance. You know, this financial literacy, how to read your account statement, you know, how to make rational financial choices. We need cultural and civic literacy, a basic understanding of the laws, values, and norms of the society, and what it means to live in a democracy. What information are you going to consume? And who are you going to consume it from? And if you consume it, what is the context? Do you have the context? And there are many Jamaicans who are just being bombarded with information, believe every little thing that they see or hear, and they don't have context. It means you're going to be misled. It means you're going to make bad decisions. So these are just some of the literacies that we need. But we need to ensure that all our students leaving our schools have these foundational literacies. Finally, we must address the long-standing issue of inequity in our education system. The COVID-19 pandemic has greatly exacerbated and deepened pre-existing inequalities. Thousands of our children, particularly those from the poorest households, have had limited or no access to the education that they really need for almost 2 years, resulting in massive learning loss and dropout rates. Of all the adverse impacts of the pandemic, this is the one that worries me the most. I am pleased to see our children back in the classroom. The government recognizes that the return to face-to-face schooling is not without risks. We are making every effort to make the school environment as safe as possible for our students and teachers. While the government will continue to do what we can, I want to appeal to parents and guardians to closely monitor your children. If you see any indication that your child is not well, please keep them at home. This is the only way we will be able to keep the infection rate down in our schools. Education is the great socioeconomic equalizer. A good education system helps to lift individuals and families out of poverty and to strengthen the middle class. Several of us, including myself, came from very humble beginnings, and we are here because of access to quality education. We owe it to the current and future generations of Jamaican children to give them the same opportunity to uplift themselves. Under our current education system, access to the best schools is too highly correlated with socioeconomic status. We must take decisive steps to improve access to quality education for the poor and underprivileged. So now that we have the Commission's report, what are the next steps? The Ministry of Education will develop a detailed plan for implementation of the recommendations with timelines. The ministry has to be responsible for the implementation. As far as possible, we must use the existing resources within the ministry, and where there are capacity gaps, we must build capacity to address those gaps. In order to be sustainable, the reforms cannot be undertaken from outside the ministry. This will not build the capacity within the ministry to sustain the reforms. Our big challenge, as the Commission has highlighted, has been implementation. Many reviews and studies have been done, but not fully implemented. To ensure that it is different this time, I will, by the end of January, appoint a monitoring and oversight committee drawn from members of the Commission and key stakeholders that will be responsible for monitoring and publicly reporting on the progress of implementation of the recommendations. We are serious about this transformation. As the Commission has said very clearly, we do not have a problem with inadequate spending on education. What we are spending in relative terms, as the Minister pointed out, and Professor Patterson pointed out as well, puts us in the top 20% of the countries in the world. But we are not getting the bang for the buck. Clearly, our focus has to be on accountability for results from the money we are spending. The root cause, and therefore the solution of all our economic and social ills, poverty, crime and violence, economic stagnation, lies in the education and socialization of our children. I am truly grateful to Professor Patterson and all the members of the Commission for undertaking this comprehensive review and giving us a blueprint for the way forward. Your work will shape the destiny of Jamaica. In our 60th year of independence, we must commit to making the transformation of our education system one of our most important priorities, if not the most important priority. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, the Most Honourable Andrew Holness. Speaking now at the official launch of the report of the High-Level Commission on Education Transformation, really beginning, I believe, a thought leadership series in Jamaica, looking at how we shape our country to meet the fourth industrial revolution and beyond, and preparing the next generation to be in a prosperous and productive and world-leading Jamaica. Thank you so much, Prime Minister. May I invite you, Prime Minister, along with the Minister of Education then, to just do a symbolic handover of the Commission report so all can see. Again, ladies and gentlemen viewing online, we will be making the report available on the OPM website and distributing it widely so you may be able to read it as well.
So the Prime Minister and the Minister of Education and Youth, the Honourable Favour Williams, have the first full official copy of the report. And of course, we have the abbreviated version as well as the recommendations of the report that will also be available. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Please indulge me, ladies and gentlemen, to once again congratulate and thank members of the Commission as we look to close this afternoon. It's been 2.5 hours of very important information for the country as we set the stage for Jamaica 60 and certainly the reform of our education system. Thank you so much to Professor the Honorable Orlando Patterson, OM, John Crawls, Professor of Sociology at Harvard University, who chaired our commission. May we have the photos of all the commissioners up, please, so that we'll be able to see them, fully acknowledge them, thank them for their passionate and meticulous work on behalf of Jamaica. So Professor Patterson, thank you so much. We also had Dr. Dana Morris-Dixon, the Chair of the Governance and Accountability and Tertiary Committees, Assistant General Manager and Chief Marketing and Business Development Officer at Jamaica National Group. Mr. Jeffrey Hall was co-chair of the Finance Committee. Mr. Hall is also the Chief Executive Officer of Jamaica Producers Group. Professor David Tennant. Professor Tennant was co-chair of the Finance Committee and Professor of Development Finance and Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of the West Indies, Mona. Ms. Floretta Plummer chaired the Technical and Vocational Education and Training Committee. Ms. Plummer is the former principal of Nagohead Primary in Portmore, St. Catherine. Ms. Erica Simmons. And Ms. Simmons, my apologies earlier, I think I neglected to name you, but you did fantastic and yeoman work chairing the Infrastructure and Technical Committee of the Commission, as well as Ms. Simmons is the Executive Director for the Center of Digital Innovation and Advanced Manufacturing at the Caribbean Maritime University. Professor Michael Taylor, Chair of the Teaching and Curriculum Committee of the Commission, and Professor Taylor is the Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences, I beg your pardon, the Dean of the Faculty of Science and Technology at UWI Mona. Other members of the Commission, Dr. Garth Anderson, Principal of Church Teachers College, Professor Eleanor Brown, Professor of Law and International Affairs at Pennsylvania State University, Professor Colin Giles, Acting President of the University of Technology, Jamaica, the Most Reverend Donald Rees, Archbishop Emeritus of Kingston and Chairman of the Ecumenical Education Committee, Professor Maureen Sams Vaughan, Professor of Child Health and Child Development and Behavior at the University of the West Indies, Mona. Mr. Gordon Swaby, Chief Executive Officer of Edufocal Limited. Ms. Esther Tyson, former Principal of Arden High. And of course, Ms. Trudy Deans, who was the main administrator and advisor of the committee. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. It really has been a pleasure hosting this, and of course, the launch of the Education Commission report. Again, it's been a morning filled with information, noting all the things about our education system, and of course, looking dispassionately and clinically at what is happening in our education system to ensure that we are able to make meaningful changes going forward. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to our officials here at the Media Center at the Office of the Prime Minister. We look forward to ensuring that we read through and digest all the information in the report, and certainly seeing the recommendations come to life and be implemented as the Ministry of Education leads that process. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Good afternoon.